What's poppin', people? It's Dante, currently walking around Old City, Philadelphia. Check it out, the brick roads. Follow the red brick road. And I've got the Ricoh GR III on the wrist strap, as always, snapshotting my way through life. And today's thought is about street photography. What is street photography? Why does it even matter? And what is prompting me to discuss this? So I was just talking to another photographer. I asked him what kind of pictures he likes to take. Mostly portraits, lifestyle stuff, mostly when people are comfortable around the camera, as opposed to the candid nature of street photography. However, I have to say, there is something to be said about this, because with street photography, a lot of people have this rigid or limited perception about what it maybe is, where you're just running and gunning and snapshotting and getting in people's faces and disturbing the space that you're photographing. But actually, with street photography, there's this sort of approach that I've developed over the years of empathetic approach, where you actually engage with people. Sometimes you chat with strangers. I always just called it like the documentary approach with the street photography aesthetic, where I'm looking to make candid photos, but I'm not afraid to interact with people. And you can still come home with candid, compelling images after interacting with strangers. Think about it. When you're photographing people, you're photographing another human. You're photographing somebody's soul. You're photographing life. You're photographing something with meaning. And to simply go around and just snapshot and take isn't necessarily what street photography is, where my best photos have always come through time spent, through working a scene, through getting to know a community, through engaging with people, through actually being there and being present when I press the shutter. Because ultimately for me, street photography has nothing to do with street photography. It has nothing to do with the visual language of making a composition, etc., etc. Photography has everything to do with how you engage with humanity out there in the open world, on the front lines of life. And so the way in which you engage with the world is what's going to reflect back in the photographs you make. And so if you like making portraits of your friends, if you're enjoying the kind of photography of a controlled environment or setting, you can adapt to the streets in your own unique way and have your own flavor in the genre of street photography, which I think is a very beautiful way to think about this, because you can essentially create your own game that you play. You don't have to follow any rules or guidelines or any ABC 1, 2, 3. This is street photography. And as I'm speaking out loud here, I don't even think of street photography as a genre. I think of street photography more like a philosophy or an ethos or an approach to the medium itself, where I'm simply a flaneur. I'm a wanderer. I'm wandering aimlessly. I'm a tourist in my hometown. I think the core philosophy to think about when you're approaching the streets with your camera is to go out there without any preconceived notions of what you will find, or to really just go out there with any destinations, with any sort of preconceived notions of a photograph you want to make or what a place may bring, and sort of go out there with your intuition and your curiosity at the forefront. I think this is really critical. And in order to practice street photography, you have to have courage. You have to cultivate that sort of inner fire within you. That sort of love for life within you is going to be a very necessary component to cultivate, because if you don't love life, if you don't love humanity, well, maybe you shouldn't practice street photography, where I think that, street photography is simple. Do you love life and humanity? Do you love walking and exploring? And do you like taking pictures and bringing your camera out there in your hometown? If you like these three things, then street photography is perfect for you. Where a street photograph doesn't necessarily have to be a candid snapshot of a moment or something that you see on a street corner. For me, as a flaneur, as somebody who loves life and loves exploring urban environments, I'm interested in the architecture. I'm interested in the infrastructure. I'm interested in these markings that are left on the ground by construction workers indicating what needs to be done underground. I'm curious about the way the light reflects off the buildings. I'm listening to the sounds of the clock tower, of the centennial bell that's now sounding here at Independence Hall in this historic old city. I'm looking at people, I'm looking at nature, I'm looking at the parks, I'm looking at the different things that encompass what it means to be a human being in the city, in this urban environment. And I think photographing the textures, photographing the landscapes, photographing the people, the buildings, the streets themselves, looking at the different sculptures, the artwork on display, looking at the posters, the signages, the lampposts, all of these things can become beautiful when you uplift these ordinary moments in a photograph. And so the key ingredient of a street photographer is to find beauty in the mundane and to uplift it in a photograph, where when you're out there in the world, and you're photographing, wherever you may be, you can practice street photography. Street photography doesn't necessarily require you to be on a street, to be in an urban environment. You can photograph on the beach, you can photograph in the mountains, in a rural village, you can photograph anywhere in the world and approach the world with this sort of ethos, this philosophy of street photography. And so I think it's important to highlight this, because a lot of people that get into street photography maybe have a preconceived idea of what it is and what it could be, blah, blah. But realistically, we all have our own unique way of engaging with the world. We all have our own unique perception. We all have our own point of view. It's very simple. So when you're on the streets, share your POV, share your point of view. I think that's the ultimate goal of an artist. And yeah, I think when you come out onto the streets with a camera, just bring your curiosity with you and photograph whatever that curiosity piques within you. And don't get too caught up with what it is, what it isn't. Is this street, is this not? I think these are all silly notions at best, and I think it's time to innovate and push the boundaries within street photography.